Hi everyone, welcome back. Can you believe all that we already have learned about Moses and the Israelites and what they went through? They were freed by Pharaoh. Finally, remember? God had saved his people. Again. Well, Moses and Aaron led the Israelites out of Egypt. This is one of the most amazing stories ever written. The 10 plagues happening finally convinced Pharaoh that he needed to let God's people leave Egypt. And so that's what happened. He couldn't take any more. So Moses left with the entire group of Israelites. Remember, last week we read that was over 600,000 men, plus all the women and the children and the animals. Well, in Exodus 14, we pick up with a story. God helped to guide them with a cloud going before them to show the way. Isn't that cool? They just followed the cloud. Well, then at night, there was what was called a pillar of fire so that they could see in the middle of the night and they could travel. Well, God shared part of his plan in Exodus 14:4, but I'll come back to that in just a minute because I want you to be surprised too. Well, Pharaoh starts to think about all that he has just lost. 600,000 workers just left, and they were free workers. So what was he going to do? Who was going to do all the work now? He didn't want to. So he found out where the Israelites were camped, and he decided to go after them. Can you believe this? He changed his mind again, forgetting about all that God had done to show his powers against him. He took 600 chariots of his own and brought an army with even more chariots. He was determined to get them back under his control. This army, though, made a lot of noise as they approached the Israelites in their camp. The ground was probably even shaking. In verse 10, we read that the Israelites lifted up their eyes and they saw the Egyptians charging towards them. Here's the biggest problem. Moses had told them to camp by the Red Sea. So they were trapped and scared. The Israelites were experts at this next move, just like we are. They started whining and complaining to Moses, saying it would have been better if we just stayed in slavery than to die right here. I just pointed out how ridiculous it was for Pharaoh to forget all that God had done and go against God again, but God's people were doing the same thing. Well, God had Moses and Aaron tell them about his plan and his promise, and he demonstrated his awesome powers against the Egyptians and got all the people out of there and reminded them of that, but their faith seemed to be gone already. I guess an Egyptian army coming after me would scare me too, though. In verse 13, Moses says, "Fear not, stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians who you see today, you shall never see again." Well, that was a pretty powerful announcement. Here they are without chariots, without weapons, by the sea, and watching as an Egyptian army comes to get them. This is so incredible. God is always so imaginative in the way he carries out his plan. He wasn't surprised that Pharaoh changed his mind. He knew all along that this was what was going to happen, and he had the best plan ready. In verse 16, God told Moses to take his staff and stretch his arm over the sea. Remember, that's how Moses and Aaron had performed God's signs with the plagues when God commanded them to. You may know part of this story, but it gives me chill bumps every time I read about it. The water just divided. Right then, there was a path of dry land that had been in the middle of the sea. God sent a powerful wind that separated the sea and dried off the path for the Israelites and their animals to walk on. Think about that. Can you imagine walking on this land and seeing the water to your right and to your left and sea animals floating by? That's amazing. I like to go to aquariums, and I think about that when I walk by those big tanks. But in an aquarium, there's a lot of thick glass separating me from the sharks. But that's not what was there. Only God's power was holding back the water. But that's so much stronger than the glass, much stronger. So the Egyptians got to the shore of the sea and they saw this path of dry land too. So they decided just to follow them. They were trying to get them back, right? But had God invited them to this? Well, no, but not really. But he didn't know they were going to do it. And so God told Moses that his glory was going to be shown that day and that he would have victory over the Egyptians. We are told that an angel had been leading the Israelites out in front in verse 19, but the angel in the cloud moved behind them at the end of the Israelites, separating them between them and the Egyptians. And the Egyptians could see this spectacular view in the sky. That pillar of fire and the cloud that had been guiding the Israelites now was there to scare the Egyptians. Their chariot wheels in this ground started getting caught. Remember, chariots were really, really heavy. And this was the sea floor, like sand and mud, if you've ever been to the beach or the lake. It was not going to hold all of that weight and let the wheels turn. God told Moses to stretch out his hand again. He did, and the sea returned to normal. That was bad news for the Egyptians, in case you didn't catch that. They were now trapped, and the water covered them. Not one of them survived. The Israelites, however, continued walking safely on dry land, even though they were still in the middle of the sea. The sea fell back into place behind them. Do you think the Israelites believed Moses now? Yes, but only for now. They sang songs of praise and as they made it safely to the other side. Well, they camped in the wilderness again, but they couldn't find clean water to drink. And so it didn't take them long to start whining again. They found some water, but it was dirty and they couldn't drink it. Well, God told Moses to toss a log into it. That's weird, right? And immediately we're told the water became sweet. God provided for every single need that they had, even when they were whining. They were supposed to trust him every day for food, and that's exactly what he gave them, food for each day. He provided manna in the morning, which was like a bread, kind of a soggy cracker maybe. And he provided quail for them in the evening so that they could have meat. And they were supposed to trust that he would give them enough for just that day and not try to gather and hide more and more and stash it somewhere. He told them that he would provide for them. Well, some time passed and the Israelites were still camped in the wilderness. They did that for a while. They were safe, but they weren't at the promised land yet. And they had some problems with people fighting. Remember, it was a lot of people and they had arguments and things like that. Well, God told Moses to climb a mountain called Mount Sinai. And he gave Moses a long list of instructions, but the people were supposed to pray and prepare to hear God's words for 3 days. And no one other than Moses was even allowed to touch or go near the mountain. Finally, Aaron was. But God spoke to the people on after the 3 days, and he gave them 10 laws to follow. We call them the 10 Commandments. How many do you think you can remember? Count as we go. Well, we studied them last year in Sunday school, but we should always know these. Number 1, love the Lord your God more than anything else. Number 2 sounds kind of the same. It says, don't make anything more important than God. And that does sound like number 1, but remember back then, people used to make statues to worship of anything. Remember the god of frogs we talked about last week? But it can just be something that we value more than God. And a lot of people, that's money. They want money so much that they let it get more important than God. And so that's the same thing that we're warned against in number 2. Number 3, always use God's name with love and respect when you say it. some people kind of turn it into bad words, and that's not acceptable. Number 4, honor the Sabbath. And we don't use that word a lot in our faith, but it means resting and honoring on the 7th day, just like God rested on the 7th day of creation. Number 5, show love and respect to mom and dad. We worked on that one a lot last year, if you remember. Number 6 is very important. Never hurt anyone with words or actions. We're just not supposed to hurt others. We have to be careful that we're thinking of others. Number 7, this is when you get married, to always be faithful to your husband or your wife. Number 8, don't take what isn't yours. Number 9, always tell the truth. And number 10, be happy with what you have and what God's given you, and don't wish for other people's things. Sometimes that's hard. Well, God showed up to tell them these 10 rules with thunder and lightning and sounds of a trumpet. The mountain, it says, it was even smoking. The people were afraid, but they knew God was speaking to them, and they listened. Again, for now. Wow, that was a lot, right? God is so amazing. The Israelites were not perfect, neither are we. They made many mistakes, even after seeing all of God's miracles and all that he had done for them. Unfortunately, I forget those things too sometimes. And sometimes I forget the promises God has made to me. And my faith is too small to face my problems. But that is one reason our Bible is so important, because I can read and reread all of these awesome stories and remember that God is bigger than any problem I face. And most importantly, he uses that power to protect me and you, because he loves us more than we can imagine.